Taking a look at the longest active head-to-head win streaks in Big Ten matchups, and wouldn't you know it, all of them include Ohio State. The Golden Gophers looking to end the second longest win streak on Saturday when they travel to the Shoe to take on the #1 team in the nation. So let's talk about this one. Welcome in Cardale Jones and Richard Johnson. And of course, we got to have Cardale here because we're talking Buckeyes. 13 straight wins for the Buckeyes. You know what it's like. What kind of pressure is there when you go into a game on a hot win streak like that?
You know, I don't think it's really so much of pressure of looking towards the win streak versus getting another win in the Big Ten Conference versus another quality opponent versus thinking about a win streak versus that quality opponent dating back to over 15 years ago. I think the Buckeyes' main focus would be finding a way to slow down a guy like Julian Smith, who had a big game last week, and find a way to win this game and head to next week as 5-0.
RJ, you look at that graphic. I mean, what does that tell you just about the dominance that Ohio State has had over the Big Ten?
Yeah, you know, I mean, in our CBS Sports research notes, they're 40-2 in the last 42 matchups against Minnesota. I mean, it's just no contest. I mean, ask this man, Cardale Jones, who's on the screen with us, about what it's like beating this team pretty much every time you go out there as Ohio State. I think for Ohio State, you know, you've owned a lot of the teams in the Big Ten for so long. But, you know, the fact that you're still everybody's main target, that doesn't change. In fact, I think it grows more and more each passing year as the Buckeyes continue to be dominant across college football. This is going to be Minnesota's Super Bowl. Ohio State has to know that they are taking Minnesota's best shot. They handled business in a tough road environment last week against Washington. Now, you get this Minnesota team, and you've got to make sure that there is no letdown in this game.
You talk about letdown. I think the expectation going into this year for Ohio State would be that there's a letdown on defense with just how many players were drafted this past April. But RJ, that has not been the case. What do you think about the 2025 Buckeyes defense?
Emily, I was pretty surprised that there's no letdown, particularly up front. Caleb Downs is going to have it rolling on the back end. He's going to make sure everybody in that back seven for Ohio State is right every single play. But to me, I looked at what they lost up front, and I thought, man, there's got to be some step back for this Ohio State team. And from snap one in the Texas game, they showed that they're still ready to go. I think Caden Curry for them up front on the edge has been a revelation. He's a tremendous player out on the edge, physical force, not exactly this like bendy edge rusher type that they had maybe with a Chase Young or a Bosa brother, but he's a player who can really set the edge, and I think sets the tone up front for Ohio State. And then you've got guys like Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese on the second level for this defense for Ohio State that are continuing to go to work every Saturday. This Matt Patricia unit is playing very well. Matt Patricia knows a thing or two about defense. I know it was a rough go the last few years for him in the NFL, but at the college end, he's got this defense humming.
You know, I totally agree with you, RJ, on that analysis of the Buckeyes 2025 defense. And I say this comment all the time, the Buckeyes don't rebuild, they just reload. Mm-hmm. These guys like Caden Curry and Caden McDonald and Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles, and even some of the young emerging guys on the back end like a Jermaine Matthews Jr. and Lorenzo Styles. These guys have been waiting in the wind to really have a bigger impact on this defense and on this team overall. And I think we've been seeing an early success of the development on Ohio State on the defense side of the ball, just through short 4 weeks throughout the season. I mean, #1 defense in the country. And I think I'd be remiss not to continue to mention that, going into week 5 and only averaging giving up 6 points, less than 6 points a game is tremendous.
Yeah, less than a touchdown. In a sport with a lot of touchdowns, that is very impressive. Cardale, I know you want to talk about these quarterbacks. Let's start on the Minnesota side of things with Drake Lindsey. He steps in. This is the 3rd straight season that Minnesota has had a new starting quarterback. How do you think he's fared so far in his first season as a starter?
So far, so good. 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and I think Minnesota's doing a great job of putting him in a great position for success. When you talk about breaking in a new quarterback, it's always a lot of what-ifs and a lot of questions up in the air. It's like, is he going to gel with the guys? How he's going to respond to a big road environment like this, playing a night game at the Shoe? But this, so far, so good. I mean, 76% last week. A couple of scores with no interceptions. That's the biggest thing right there for me as breaking in a new first-time starting quarterback is he going to protect the football? Is he going to make sure our offense is in good position? Minnesota does a great job on the offensive side of the ball of giving him a lot of freedom at the line of scrimmage. Last week versus Rutgers, he did some great things to getting guys in the right positions as far as the protection so the play can have success. Minnesota do a really good job of staying ahead of the change, which ultimately get them in good position for third down conversions.
I think the thing with Minnesota on offense is also that Lindsey's pushing the ball down the field a little bit. He's given them an explosive element that they haven't really had in the passing game. Minnesota's been that kind of classic kind of ground and pound, and you thought with Darius Taylor coming into the season that they would kind of continue to do that. But Lindsey's given them a dimension on offense that I think is a little bit different for them, and I think it's pretty good. Now, the challenge will be against that Ohio State defense. Matt Patricia showed, particularly in that first game against Arch Manning, he can confuse a quarterback who's really, really talented. He can come out with a defensive system that's going to keep everything in front of them and make you try to drive the ball 8, 10, 12 plays down the field and be consistent to win games. Can Drake Lindsey and Minnesota do that if the explosive play isn't there? That's my big question for them in this game.
Yeah, certainly getting back running back Darius Taylor would help on the offensive side of the ball. On the other side, Julian Sayin, I mean, he's one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the country, and it does help to have Jeremiah Smith to throw to. Cardale, I'm sure you would have loved to have him as a weapon. What have you thought, Cardale, of that connection so far this season between those two?
So far, so good. I think their time dating back to their high school days and the 707 tournaments and a little bit of experience there. But when you have guys like Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Ennis, Carnell Tate, and the list goes on for dynamic playmakers surrounding the quarterback position at Ohio State. It makes your job a lot easier, and then you start to understand why he's completing almost 80% of his passes. But Julian, I think when you look at the evolution of Julian Sayin and his progression through these first 4 weeks of the season, you really got to give more credit, in my opinion, to the play calling and offensive staff and the pieces around him, because they're doing a really good job of keeping him comfortable and not really putting him in harm's way at all. I mean, I think versus Washington last week, he might have had 1 or 2 passes, if that, beyond 20 yards. But you still win the game, and I think he had 2 total touchdowns. Now, when you can say, I want to have 2+ touchdowns and complete the ball for over 80% of the game without putting in too much harm's way of taking so many shots downfield, I think you got to give a lot of credit to the guys around you.
You know, Cardale, I think what's interesting for me with this Ohio State offense is not the Jeremiah Smith piece. I mean, you just write off that he's going to be able to give you, 100 yards receiving and a touchdown or 2 every game. I mean, he's just such a special talent. It was what was around him in the receiver room. You lose a guy like Emeka Egbuka last year, who I thought, that was a professional football player on that offense last year, and you see how good he is early days in the NFL. I thought that was massive for Jeremiah Smith's development as a young receiver, despite all the raw talent he had. How would Jeremiah Smith transition to being more of the sole alpha dog in that wide receiver room? That was my big question for Ohio State. But I think an under-the-radar thing for the Buckeyes is the production that they're getting from the running backs, C.J. Donaldson, and especially Bo Jackson. I mean, he's got the name, obviously, but he's a young player who has really come on strong for the Buckeyes. And the best friend to any running back is a tremendous running game, and the Buckeyes have that as well this season.
Yeah, Bo Jackson stepping onto the scene. I feel like last week when he had that great performance, everybody was Googling, wait, is there any sort of connection there? It's just crazy.
Oh, no relations.
Yeah, no relation, but that is a football name if I've ever heard one. RJ, what's your game prediction for this one?
My game prediction is actually that Minnesota is able to cover this game. Big spread. I think Minnesota covers, but Ohio State wins. I think Minnesota's offense is going to be able to test Ohio State's defense a little bit and keep pace, relatively. Keep pace, but it's still going to be a comfortable Ohio State win by 2 scores in this game.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, RJ. Historically, even for my time playing against Minnesota, has always been a competitive game. And seeing this spread at over 20 points is kind of a head scratcher for me, especially the way Drake Lindsey is able to protect the football and not put it in harm's way. Minnesota, I think game plan will be limited the time of possession for Ohio State. So I think the key for them to keep this thing close as far as that spread. I do think Ohio State still pull away from this thing with a 2-score game. But the 10 to 12 play drive is going to be key for Minnesota and making sure they come up with 3 or 6 points that cap those drives.
Yeah, Jeremiah Smith can't eat you up through the air if he's not getting the football. So that is a smart game plan there. And thank you both so much for that great breakdown. We appreciate it. You can catch more of them and all of our college football analysts on the CBS Sports College Football YouTube page. Make sure that you are subscribed for more game breakdowns and unique content throughout the season. We made it so easy for you. Just scan that QR code on your screen.